Hey, what's up everyone? My name is Gavin Smith.
Hi, I'm Nico McKellis. What is the Cuban Missile Crisis? Today, you're going to find that out. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a conflict between America and Russia when Russia decided that they wanted to put missiles in Cuba. But they only did that after realizing that America had put missiles in Italy and Turkey.
So what brought upon this crisis, who what brought it to an end, and what important lessons have we learned from this near-nuclear situation? We'll hop in, buckle up, and we're going to look out the window as we take a ride on this Cuban Missile Crisis.
The scene is October 14th, 1962. America was flying a reconnaissance plane, over Cuba when they noticed something scary. Missiles sent from Russia.
Now, America at this time period never had good relations with Cuba. Cuba, for one, was a communist nation of pre-democratic roots. And not only that, but America used to have influence in Cuba, which is no longer present there because of their communist rule. The Red Scare, of course, did not take a blind eye to this, and America soon enough was making plans to overthrow, or at least reinstall, Cuba's government in favor of some good old American democracy.
The Cuban Missile Crisis was an unarmed confrontation between Russia and America when Russia decided they wanted to put missiles in Cuba.
Fueled by political and more disagreement, as well as the U.S.'s own placement of missiles in Italy and Turkey, the Cuban Missile Crisis will prove to be the point where the Cold War almost went blazing hot.
In the beginning of Kennedy's presidency, Khrushchev and Kennedy weren't really that distant. They didn't really hate each other. They would send messages back and forth to each other about, they would congratulate each other on things that would happen. After a while, into Kennedy's presidency, Khrushchev really started becoming more distant to Kennedy. He would start forming his own opinions like he was weak, or he couldn't maintain a crisis. Fidel Castro hated Kennedy so much that they would try to assassinate each other regularly. However, Castro and Khrushchev's relationship was neutral. It was a neutral relationship that they had.
Once Khrushchev encountered Castro with the plan to put missiles in Cuba, Castro was quick to turn it down, saying he did not want to look like a Soviet puppet state.
However, upon further discussion, Castro was convinced that the missiles would keep out further U.S. invasion and ensure their safety. As such, he agreed for the missiles to be short-range, usable only against naval forces. I don't know what to say first. And so began Operation Anadir, which is when the Soviet Union decided they wanted to put nuclear warheads in Cuba. And upon that discovery, the U.S. had to make a really tough decision.
You see, the U.S. never actually expected the Soviets to put missiles in Cuba, and as such, multiple solutions were thrown around what to do about the situation, including forming a naval blockade around Cuba, performing yet another invasion, or just doing absolutely nothing, hoping for the best. There you go. Thanks. Good enough.
The Joint Chief of Staff decided that invading Cuba was the only thing that the U.S. could have done. However, Kennedy did not like that idea. He feared that the Russians would see this as an opportunity to invade West Berlin.
What?
Finally, the U.S. decided that they were going to do a blockade on Cuba. However, they did not say blockade because that means like war involvement and stuff, you know?
That's good enough, yeah. Not only that, but it seemed that Khrushchev was acting in response to the U.S.'s own placement of juvenile missiles in Turkey. America put their nuclear missiles in both Italy and Turkey after advice of NATO, telling them that they should put their missiles near Russia just in case a war broke out. However, later in the conflict, Russia told the United States that if they took their missiles out of Turkey, they would take theirs out of Cuba. Little did they know, however, America was planning on taking their missiles out of Turkey as well. The Cuban Missile Crisis started on October 16th, 1962, and lasted 12 days until October 28th, 1962. Same year. On October 18th, Robert Kennedy meets with the foreign minister of Russia and finds out that the missiles are there for defense, or at least that's what Russia likes to say.
On October 23rd, Khrushchev told all ships heading to Cuba On October 23rd, Khrushchev told all ships going to Cuba to stop because they didn't want anything to be started with the U.S. And on October 27th, Kennedy promised to not invade Cuba, and a day later, Khrushchev took all missiles out of Cuba. However, the U.S. invaders surrendered after only 3 days for a lack of supplies and reinforcements, leaving Cuba weary of America and their leader, Fidel Castro, favoring more the USSR and its leader, Nikita Khrushchev, who took advantage of this situation and tried to convince Cuba of allowing the USSR to construct and install nuclear warheads on their territory.
American people understood how they were vulnerable to this kind of disaster at any moment. People even protested at the University of California, Berkeley, debating about the naval blockade.
Also, there was a 12-day political and military standoff over the installation of the Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba. And now here's a cool video.
The Cuban Missile Crisis
of 1962 was when Kennedy faced off
with Premier Khrushchev of the Soviet
Union. See, back in '59, Cuba's Revolutionary War
made it
a tiny communist country right near the U.S. shore. That same year, the U.S. made a deal with Turkey's leaders to put U.S. nukes in Turkey to fire at Russia if needed. Flash forward to October 1962 again. Soviet nukes are found in Cuba like ours in Turkey right near them. The U.S. Joint Chiefs told JFK this was a good occasion to get rid of Cuba's government with a big U.S. invasion. But JFK said no because those nukes were awfully frightening. If we struck Cuba, Russia might think attacking us would be the right thing. It could lead to nuclear war, and of all outcomes, that's the worst. So JFK said before invading, let's try something else first. So one night on TV, he announced the plan he'd made. He'd stop Soviet shipments to Cuba with a strict naval blockade. But Khrushchev of the Soviets said this was risking war. You can't just stop our ships, he said, the blockade will be ignored. And when the U.S. got this message the night of October 23, defense went up to DEFCON 2, the highest nuke alert in history. This meant the U.S. was just one step from launching nuclear weapons, and as the blockade began stopping boats, no one knew what would happen. But then a KGB agent named Fomin in the States said, let's just try a peaceful trade before this escalates. Fomin said if the U.S. promised to leave Cuba alone, maybe then the Soviets could promise to take the defensive missiles home. Then Khrushchev tried a different deal to make a missile recall work. He said the U.S. should leave Cuba be and take their nukes out of Turkey. So JFK agreed to never invade Cuba, and he secretly also agreed to take the nukes off Turkish land. That part was kept a secret, so Kennedy could still look tough, but the fact was that both leaders thought things had gone quite far enough. Kennedy died 63, Khrushchev lost power 64, and that was the closest the world has ever come yet to a nuclear war.
Thank you for watching the Cuban Missile Crisis video. If you liked the video, subscribe.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you want to see more videos, be sure to subscribe to Starving Go Alone to YouTube.com.